I would like to share something that is very personal, hoping that it can prevent others from making the same mistakes as I did. My name is Jonah. I am 28 years old and work as a nurse in a rather hectic hospital ward. Ralph, my boyfriend, is 29 and works in a workshop. He is calm, kind, and very down to earth. Our relationship has always been good. We have not had any major problems. We love each other and have lived together for several years. In my ward, there are several nurses who talk about their open relationships and polyamorous relationships. Their names are Lauren, Kelly, and Donna, and all three seem very satisfied with their way of living. I had never really considered if it would be something for me, but I noticed that their talk about freedom and excitement sparked my curiosity. They explained how it can be a spice in a relationship and how it can keep the passion alive. I can't say I was convinced at first, but I was enticed by the idea. Everything changed when I met Dr. Alexander, a doctor at the hospital. I noticed that he was different compared to Ralph. Confident, extremely knowledgeable, and also very forward in his manner. While Ralph is cautious and not as intellectually challenging, Dr. Alexander is straightforward, innovative, and really dares to take the lead in discussions. I am used to Ralph's calm presence, but something about Dr. Alexander's strong personality attracted me. During a ward party, Dr. Alexander started talking to me. I felt flattered by his attention. We exchanged numbers and later kept in loose contact, mostly about work. But quite soon, we slid into more personal topics. We wrote long messages about things that really felt beyond friendly colleagues. He told me that he liked to socialize with people who were open and curious, and I sensed that he was referring to something more than just topics of conversation. We got into the subject of open relationships and polyamory since several of my colleagues had already talked about it. Then Alexander revealed that he and his wife are in an open relationship. He explained that they have their own rules, but essentially are free to meet others, provided that everything is done honestly and openly. I immediately became even more curious and asked him 1,000 questions. How did you decide to open up your relationship? He replied that they had been together for a long time and felt they needed to try something new to avoid routine. How do you handle jealousy? He said that jealousy can still arise, but they make sure to talk through everything, set boundaries, and show each other respect. Do you or your wife ever feel bad about the thought of the other seeing someone else? He said that sometimes they can feel anxious, but open communication and honesty help them manage it. How do you find partners outside the marriage? He said there are networks, friends, and mutual contacts. In their case, it was often natural meetings at parties or through acquaintances. I sucked in every word. Part of me thought that what he described sounded incredibly exciting. He suggested that I could accompany him to a meeting or event where such couples and singles met. By then, we had already sent overly personal texts, so it was obvious that I was interested in more than just listening. He said I was beautiful. I said that I was attracted to him and that I wanted to see what this could mean. I felt no guilt about our messages. Something inside me disconnected the thought of Ralph and our normal life, even though I really loved him. But if I wanted this to become reality, I had to talk to Ralph first. So one Friday evening, after we had dinner, I sat down with Ralph. I got straight to the point. I explained that I loved him, but that I was curious about open relationships and wanted to explore it. He was horrified. He had always been more traditional and calm, so that I now suddenly suggested that we have the freedom to meet other people really caught him off guard. I had thought he might be a bit cautious but curious, but instead I saw him collapse. He said that just the thought of this made him feel bad, that he couldn't imagine how we could be happy if we involved more people in our relationship. He said that he loved me and wanted to be careful for me. I stood my ground, explained that maybe it could be a way to avoid losing each other in the future, that it could be exciting and beneficial for us. Honestly, I sounded almost aggressive when I tried to persuade him, because I was so determined to try it. I want to try it with Alexander. But he refused to continue the conversation at that moment. He said that he couldn't stand thinking about me with someone else. I saw how he suffered, but I thought that maybe he just needed time. I would give him a few days and bring it up again, because I was really determined to try this new world that Alexander and my colleagues talked about so warmly. Today, I can only say that I wish I had stopped, listened to my gut feeling, and been more considerate of Ralph's feelings. But I was blinded by the excitement of everything new. I write this in the hope that someone else who is considering opening their relationship will think things through and talk properly with their partner, because it can really go wrong if only one person is enthusiastic. I wish I had realized it earlier. After Ralph temporarily ended the conversation, I went back to contacting Alexander behind his back. Our messages became increasingly intimate, and I noticed that I looked forward to his words and attention more than Ralph's. Alexander had a way of making me feel special, as if I was part of something bigger than my simple, monotonous life. One day at work, after spending the morning sending flirty texts to Alexander, I saw him in the corridor. He stopped and smiled at me. "Do you have time for a coffee?" he asked. We went to the staff room, and when we were sure that no one could hear us, our conversation became more than just words. He leaned forward and kissed me, and I returned the kiss without even thinking of Ralph. It was exciting, forbidden, and intense. Afterwards, I didn't feel a shred of guilt. I wanted more of this. Later that day, I was in his office delivering papers. We started talking, and he said that the submissive women he had taken care of had always given him their underwear as a sign that they are ready to submit to him, as a surrender and commitment from both sides that he will take care of her and she will give herself to him. He asked me if I was ready to do that. I was embarrassed and a bit red in the cheeks, but I nodded. He made a gesture indicating that I should take them off. I didn't hesitate. I took off my pants inside his office and then my underwear while he watched. He looked at me. I gave them to him and then put my pants back on. I got a rush of emotions from showing myself. I had never done that before, and it felt like I had given him my word now. I felt seen, sexy, and desired. I knew I was a beautiful woman, but all of this was new, and I ended up, as I have realized afterward, in a fog. In this fog, you can't think or see clearly, but you believe that you can. That evening, after staying silent all through dinner, I brought up the subject again. Ralph was sitting on the couch watching TV when I sat down next to him. I said that we had to talk about this open relationship, and he sighed. I could clearly see that he did not want any discussion. I said that I had thought a lot about it and that I really believe it would be good for us. But he said that he does not want to share me with others and that he could not handle it. And he said that he does not understand where this is coming from. Why I am so stubborn about this. Then he said something that made me think a bit. I would never pressure you into something you are so uncomfortable with. I flinched. I knew he was right. But I didn't care. I felt I was right. Now in hindsight, I know I was not right. I was driven by selfish desires. Nothing else. I continued to argue and press on, explained why it was a good idea and that I did not want to live my life locked up in anything. "And what if I say no?" he asked. His look was both sad and angry. I hesitated but decided to be straight. I said that I don't know, but that I can't ignore my feelings. He said that it sounds like if you don't get to do this, then you will leave me or go behind my back. I assured him that this was not the case, but honestly, I had already done the latter, and I was desperate enough to continue with it. He sat silent for a long time, staring at his hands. "This feels like an ultimatum," he finally said. I said nothing and let him think. After a long pause, he finally nodded, but his gaze was empty. "Okay," he said, almost whispering, "if that's what you really want." "Do you mean it?" I asked, almost relieved. He said that he meant it, but that he didn't know how to handle it. I was overjoyed and hugged him, but he did not hug me back. It was clear on him how uncomfortable he was with this. Still, I took it as completely fantastic news. I said that it would be fantastic for both of us and that we would come closer to each other. He asked what rules we would have, and I did not understand what he meant. I said that I do not believe in rules, but that we would just go along and then see how everything goes. Ralph looked at me as if he did not really understand what I was saying, but he nodded again. As soon as Ralph agreed to it, I sent a message to Alexander. We talked a bit more. It was around 10 p.m. I sent a text to Alexander and asked if I could stay with him tonight. He replied that it was fine because his wife was at a medical conference. I got up and got dressed and then went downstairs and told Ralph that I would sleep over at Alexander's tonight and that I would come home tomorrow after work. He looked completely shocked. He had not expected it. It took him completely by surprise, and I said all this in passing and then went to the car. Every time I think back to his facial expression at that moment, I start crying. I am crying now as I write this. I cannot understand how I could ignore him in this way. I think this was when our relationship died, and it was me who killed it. At Alexander's, I spent the night. It was everything I had imagined: passionate, exciting, and liberating, and not like anything I had experienced before. I only slept a few hours the whole night, and despite that, I had energy the next day to work all day. I felt no regret, only euphoria over having followed my feelings. This despite the fact that Ralph texted me all evening and night. He asked who Alexander was, if it was planned and that I wanted to be with him all the time, if it was because of him that I wanted an open relationship, that he thought we would talk more about this before something happened, and that he felt deceived and that I did not tell him the whole truth. I never replied. I thought that we would talk when I got home the next evening. Afterwards at work, I was full of energy. I was happy, content, tender, and had a red backside. I had let Alexander break every rule I had. I had given myself to him, and he had done exactly as he wanted with me. And I had loved every second. Now, in hindsight, I cannot understand why I broke so many of my rules with him that I refused to break with Ralph. Desperation to be part of his world, that's all I can think of. When I came home late in the evening, Ralph was already home. I felt excited and happy, full of energy after the night with Alexander. I knew that we would have some pretty tough conversations now. I ignored him during the night, and now he will surely want answers. I greeted him cheerfully and leaned forward to kiss him on the cheek. He recoiled, so much that it almost looked instinctive. I stood there a moment, unsure of what to do, but then I shrugged and thought that he probably just needed some time. I went to the kitchen, filled a glass with water, and sat down at the dining table. He turned off the TV, got up, and walked over to me. I could see how hurt he was, how tired he looked. "Who is Alexander?" was the first question. I was prepared for it. I answered that he was a colleague I worked with, a doctor. Now he looked upset. "So you sit here and talk about exploring and discovering new things, and then you have already gone and made plans with him behind my back. You have planned to have sex with another man, and you never thought you would talk about it before?" I had not really expected him to take it this way, but I should have actually understood it. I had a hard time defending myself against it, and I am not entirely sure what I said. I know it sounded like nonsense, that it was just talk about open relationships, and that when you and I decided on it, it seemed like a good place to start at. There was no doubt that he did not buy my explanation. He said it was bullshit and that no woman would go home to a man she did not already feel safe with. To feel safe, it must have been preceded by lots of talk and planning. He was right, of course. All correct. We had planned this, and the betrayal had already started at my job. Both emotionally and physically, we had crossed all boundaries. But I had no thought of admitting that. So when he asked if we had done something already before he had been forced into this, I replied lightning fast no. He looked extremely skeptical. He meant that I had let him think that we would explore it together and that he perceived it as if we started at the same time. When he finally said yes to this, I went to another man just a couple of hours later. I tried to downplay this as much as I could, that it was not a big deal, or to imply that it was not as good as it was. Then he asked if we had used protection, and I blushed and looked away. Then he got up and left. He went into the bedroom and closed and locked the door. He refused to open it, and I had to sleep on the couch. During the night, I had a hard time sleeping. I was angry and disappointed in him. He had agreed to this, and now he was upset? I didn't understand it. I started texting Alexander and kept doing it all night. He comforted me and tried to cheer me up. He said that Ralph would probably get over it with time. It didn't take long before our conversation became intimate again, and I sent several pictures to him at his urging. Everything with him was new and exciting, and I couldn't wait until I could see him again. The next day was not fun. I woke up to go to work and Ralph was already up. He looked worn out, as if he had cried, but when I asked and tried to hug him, he kept me at a distance and said that he wasn't going to touch me until this experiment is over because I have shown such bad judgment that he does not trust that I am healthy. It turned out that he kept that promise. We had not had sex anymore since that day, and no kisses. I thought he was extremely unfair and said that he had the same freedoms as me. It's just to go out and find a woman and go for it. But he snorted at me. From that day on, I fully immersed myself in my adventures with Alexander. We had sex as often as we could. I slept over at his place as soon as his wife worked night shifts. Sometimes it was 3 to 4 days some weeks. I never told Ralph when I was going to be away or what I was doing, and he did not ask. Either. Ralph and I stopped talking to each other, and he did not seem to be well. I thought it was just a phase, something that would pass. I was too much having fun to stop and reflect on what was happening with him. About 8 months later, he began to change. I could see that he was becoming happier and in better spirits, and I thought that this phase was now over. I thought that we might be able to resume our sex life and return to normal, but he said he did not want that. I tried to ask why, but he did not want to talk about it. "You have your now, be satisfied with it," was all he said. And I was satisfied with Alexander. But I loved him. And 8 months without closeness with a man you love is a very long time. But he was adamant. This was one of those points in time that you never forget. You know, an occasion when you gain an insight. My insight was that the relationship I had with Alexander did not contain substance. It was a fantasy. It was a physical relationship that did not extend beyond the bedroom door. If you removed the physical between me and Alexander, there was nothing left. It was just about one thing, nothing else. While what I had with Ralph was about everything else. There was substance in the form of love, family, mutual friends, Christmas, New Year, Easter, birthdays for me, him, our friends, and family. Shared experiences like vacations, excursions, practical jokes. Everything that makes up a complete life. I did not know what friends Alexander had, what his wife had for a birthday, and so on. And I did not care either. When this insight hit me, time froze. I became completely stiff and just stood there thinking. I don't know how long I stood there just staring straight ahead. When I came out of my trance-like state, Ralph had already gone to work. I did not understand why he couldn't be with me. It had been almost a year, and he looked much happier and livelier. He should have let it go by now. I had known all along that my adventures would not change anything between me and Ralph, and they did not either. I loved him just as much now as before. Maybe even more. I worked during the day, and when I came home, he was not there. He did not come home all night. I texted him, but he did not respond. The evening after, I was a bit upset and a little scared too. I scolded him for not answering, but he just shrugged. He pointed out that I also did not answer texts when I was busy, which was true, but after the first night with Alexander, he never sent me a single text when I slept away, so it can't be compared, I thought. I asked where he had been and found out that he had been at a friend's. We lived together, but we were not together. I loved him as much as always, but I did not feel that it was so from his side. Even though I loved being with Alexander, it didn't feel the same anymore. The novelty had worn off, and the electric excitement was no longer the same. I thought that I probably should get a new man. Ralph began to sleep away more and more nights, and eventually it was obvious that he had met a woman. Then something happened that I did not expect. I became seriously jealous. In fact, I panicked. This happened at work when I was with a patient, and I had to excuse myself and run into the bathroom where I had a crying attack. I couldn't stop. It took me almost an hour to calm down enough to go back out. But my eyes were completely red, and I looked terrible. In the evening, I hurried home. I had to end this now so that it didn't end with us breaking up. But he was not home. He was with his friend. I texted, but no answer. I called several times, but no answer. I had to spend the night alone. I cried and had a panic attack, for the first time in my life. It was a terrible experience. Was this how he had felt when I forced an open relationship on him, and then, barely 2 hours later, went to Alexander and had a whole night while he lay at home alone and texted without getting an answer? I didn't sleep a wink. The next day, I took sick leave. I was not in condition to go to work. Alexander wrote and asked how it was, but I did not reply. In the evening, he came home and I sat him down and said that I wanted to close the relationship again. Just him and me? No one else. This had gone too far, and I said that I realized that this was an extremely bad idea. His reply was, "As long as it was only you who had someone on the side, it was totally okay. But now that I've found someone, then you don't want to continue anymore?" I would not believe it. I said that it was not at all like that, but that I saw that it had hurt him, and therefore I wanted to end it so that we can come back to each other. Then he gave me a severe scolding. I have never seen him so angry. He yelled at me that he had been so down that the doctor had given him antidepressants, yeah, it's so that he could handle his job, and I completely ignored how bad he felt, even though he left them out so that I would see them and understand, because I refused to listen to him when he did try to talk to me. Now, suddenly, when I got my fun and he found someone who got him out of all dark thoughts, then I want to close this again. He said that he never wanted to see me again and then asked me to go to hell. He left the apartment, and I do not know where he went. Since then, I have not seen him. I tried texting, emailing, and calling for several months after, but he never responded to any of it. No. Since all this happened, I have had plenty of time to think it through. I never realized how insanely badly I treated him when I was in my fog. All I had in mind was my own desire and self-interest. He had left the pills out, and honestly, I had seen them, but I thought it was just a phase. Just like I thought with all the other signs that he was really unwell. I thought he would feel better when he got used to it. Only when he found someone and I suffered the same anxiety that he must have had, I understood what I had subjected him to. The difference was only that he was subjected to this for 8 months, and I only managed one day, 24 hours before I asked to end the relationship. Never pressure someone else into open relationships. If you got together with the premise of living monogamously, then it almost never works to open the relationship afterwards. In the few cases that it works, both parties are equally enthusiastic about it. The relationship is stable as a rock. The parties can communicate their needs and feelings without barriers, and jealousy does not exist. If not all these requirements are met, then an open relationship will never work. And most do not work in any case. I threw away a perfect relationship to experience some fun in bed with a man who meant nothing to me. I do not think there are many things as stupid as that.
If you liked this story, please subscribe and give us a thumbs up. It helps a lot, and you won't miss out on any future stories. Take care and live your best life.